This is the Storypunks podcast, a show where we talk about all the punks. So steampunk, dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and all the other punks. I'm your host, Cindy Grigg. This is episode 4, and I am so thrilled to be interviewing Beth Cato, a steampunker with dieselpunker leanings. If you would like to see some of the visual elements we go over in this episode, you can watch this interview on YouTube. And on that visual note, in episode 3, I introduced some fun stuff I'm displaying on my set, like this amazing poster that reminds us to never give up, in classic microcosm publishing style with this cavalcade of flying bicycles. My dress form is sporting a fabulous t-shirt that bicycle enthusiasts and storypunkers alike can find in tons of different colors, different cuts, so head to microcosmpublishing.com for these goodies, some amazing zines and books, and so much more. So the first thing I want to share in my personal update this week is this little matter of starting a podcast. Now, I knew this was going to be difficult, but there's no sugarcoating it. This has blown me out of the water. I underestimated what would be involved, as we do, right? It's its own thing. It's its own adventure, and that comes with all the inefficiencies and roller coaster ride of a true adventure. So there you go. I hope you are getting value out of this podcast. I'm also working on my series titled Peacock Levine and the Etherean Fates of Naught. And again, Naught with 2 T's, that is the name of Thor's grandmother. So this is a series that focuses on the women in Norse mythology. I know this pairing of Norse myth and Regency and steampunk may sound odd, but believe me, I've discovered so many parallel themes among these elements, and it just excites me more every day. You've probably had this experience as you're working on your own creations. It doesn't always happen, but once in a while you'll come across this convergence of a whole bunch of things, and then it just surprises you how much more they converge than you even intended. And that's been the case with this work in progress. I'm nerding out over it. And if this sounds at all interesting to you, I think you'll nerd out over it too. And I would love to have you as one of my beta readers. And you know, you're all alphas to me. So you're my alpha readers, my alpha beta, whatever you want to be called. I'd love to have you be one of my readers. You can go to cindygrigg.com, CINDYGRIGG.com. Without further ado, let's get into this week's interview. I'm so excited today to welcome Beth Cato. This starts out our discussion of steampunk on this show. I know you're going to love learning about her if you haven't already read some of Beth's work. So let me start by reading her bio. Beth Cato hails from Hanford, California, but currently writes and bakes cookies in a lair west of Phoenix, Arizona. And when you go to Beth's site, you will see that she blogs about this other passion that she has. So we'll be talking about that. She shares the household with a hockey-loving husband, a numbers-obsessed son, and a cat the size of a canned ham. Awesome. She's the author of The Clockwork Dagger, a 2015 Locus Award finalist for first novel, and The Clockwork Crown, an RT Reviewer's Choice finalist from Harper Voyager. Her novella Wings of Sorrow and Bone was a 2016 Nebula nominee. Her new alt history steampunk series began with Breath of Earth and continues with her new release, Call of Fire. Follow her, at bethcato.com and on Twitter at BethCato. So welcome to the show, Beth. It's so good to have you on.
Well, thank you. It's so great to talk with you.
Thank you. So we'll jump right into questions because we have so many. We have some that have been submitted from Twitter as well as through our show phone line. So if you are not familiar with the show yet, welcome. And you can submit questions through our phone line at 801-637-5016. Feel free to text or leave a voicemail. So I'll jump in with a few of my questions. And my first one is this. Beth. In this show, we discuss the punks, and today we're focusing on steampunk. Since everyone defines it differently, what is your take on it? And what do you think is in bounds when it comes to steampunk?
Steampunk is so hard to define, but it's so image based. I mean, people think about the corsets, about the clothing, and that's part of it, but that's not all of it. I was on a really neat panel, I think it was at Worldcon last year, that was about steampunk as an aesthetic. And it went to steampunk because it's one of those things you automatically think Victorian England or, Weird West, it neatly fits in those places. But steampunk can also be post-apocalyptic. It can also be something like Firefly, which is, space Western, and it fits into that too. And it can even fit into different areas of history. You could rewrite Roman, Greek history with steampunk elements to it if their technology went that way. So for me, steampunk is something that just it can flow because it has a vibe to it. And it also goes to the maker element, which is very important, especially in steampunk communities around the country and around the world, where there's the heavy can-do spirit of, okay, we need to get to this place. Well, we'll build something that will fly us there. It's this bit where you can raid the garbage and come up with magnificent inventions. And that's such a steampunk thing.
It's so good. And you can see how this is hard to define, right? Because it's something you feel more than you can say. Sometimes I like to say that, but it's exactly what Beth just described. And that was a wonderful definition. And there are so many definitions. I know that it's important to keep talking about it, and it informs all of our art. So thank you so much for jumping in with that. I think that's the hardest question personally, because it's when I've been on panels at conventions and stuff, it's one that is difficult to define, and yet we're so excited to define it. So I'm always grateful for more definitions on it. And my next question is, if you will just take us through your catalog of steampunk books and let us know what the major themes are, because that can really guide people who haven't jumped in with your work yet.
Well, my two series are very different in how they approach steampunk. My Clockwork Dagger books, I now like to pitch them as Final Fantasy meets Agatha Christie.
I love that. That's so awesome.
Because they have a lot of those epic fantasy type elements, but it's still an industrial setting. And the kinds of drama that you see in a setting like that, with pollution, with the advances in war and military technology, all of those kinds of things coming together. So, and that makes it have a different theme, because at the same time you have like this cozy mystery Agatha Christie, and it is inspired by Murder on the Orient Express, but on an airship.
That's so cool.
That's literally
I'm excited for the new movie that's coming out, and that just really would be cool to like read your book, watch the movie.
Hey, if we can get a tie-in deal on that, I'm all for it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so the Clockwork Dagger books, and the lead character is a healer, and it's very important for me to see a character that's normally relegated to being the side character who keeps the big burly heroes alive. And instead, Octavia is the heroine. And she doesn't like violence. She is going to try and heal the bad guys even after she shoots them. But that's what makes her powerful, because she's empathetic and compassionate. Those are her strengths.
That's awesome, because sometimes we don't see those focused on as readily as some of the other strengths. So that's really refreshing to me. But
and you see that in the side characters, but not in the lead character. Yeah, the Blood of Earth series is my new series. And in contrast to Clockwork Dagger, it is heavier alternate history. And that's very much the focus of it. It's 1906 San Francisco with magic, incredible creatures, geomancy, a new take on World War, because it has the United States and Japan are allied and taking over China as the book begins.
That is so cool. And that's a really fun place, because you can still draw on steampunk technology, or you could try to, do an advance on some of the Dieselpunk and stuff like that, move history forward a little faster. Which take did you do for that?
Well, it definitely is like on the, it's airships and things like that, but I do like to edge towards the Dieselpunk. And even Clockwork Dagger, that's based on like World War I era Europe.
Yeah.
So that's really an era that I like, in part because women were striving for more independence then. So I think my heroines and the type of things I want to do fit into that period a little bit more, because they can, they can be a little bit more rebellious, and it's not quite so, oh, how dare they?
Yeah.
It, you know.
Yep. I totally get it. I think that's really cool. So, Beth, you've written alternate history steampunk as well as stories in your own worlds. Which has captured your heart more, or do you like them both? And what are the advantages or disadvantages of each?
Well, they each have advantages and disadvantages for sure. With Clockwork Dagger, there was the difficulty of creating my own world from scratch. But there was a lot of freedom in that too, because I get to make my own religion, I get to make my own geography, I get to piece together my own history. I don't have to worry about, trying to make cultures accurate, because I'm making my own cultures. So there was a lot of freedom in that, but at the same time, it's having to make everything from scratch. So there's a lot more work into that too, because I can't just rely on giving cues to the readers. I have to teach them a whole lot more about this world as well. And then with Breath of Earth and Call of Fire, I was basing it strongly on 1906 and on that era, which is good, because if I say, picture San Francisco, people can picture San Francisco as it was before the earthquake, things like that. And I do get the advantage. I can mention things like Shakespeare quotes, or I can, do biblical references. And it's amazing how things like that we take for granted in our everyday society. I mean, we have this huge, this wealth of material that we refer to culturally just on a daily basis that we can draw on, that I couldn't do that in Clockwork Dagger, but I could do that in Breath of Earth and Call of Fire. And as for which is easier, gosh, that's a really hard question. I mean, with my Blood of Earth series, the research for that has been very intimidating. And going back for, 4 years now that have really spent reading books and researching for that series. Clockwork Dagger didn't need that much investment. It was more of, oh, I want to throw this into my world. I can throw this into my world and have fun with it. So time-wise, it was easier to create my own world from scratch. But I'm a history junkie too. So even though the historical research was time-consuming and brain-breaking at times, it was still really fun.
Yeah, because some authors will hear 4 years and maybe they haven't done a research heavy creation like that. And they're just thinking, oh my goodness, but it is fun. It's nice to hear that that's fun and it wasn't just, drudgery.
Yeah, and really, I mean, if you're going to start working on a book, you have to think of, okay, this is something I'm going to be reading over 1 million times and I'm going to be staring at for probably a couple years. I better love it a lot to begin with, because there are going to be points when you get sick of it, and I think that's natural. But in the end, you still want to love it.
Yes, absolutely. Wise words. So my next question is about diversity and how your books contain diverse characters. And I'm always interested how authors carry that off so well, how they go about it. What's the, I guess, clockwork behind it? Is it research? Is it some other method? And I want to mention that you can go see all her research that she put into her latest books. So it's in probably all your books, right, Beth?
Well, Clockwork Dagger didn't have that many, so I
As
didn't know
much, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my impression. So yeah, and that's educational just in and of itself, to see all the books that she references and how well she laid it out. So now I'll turn it over to you, Beth.
Yeah, for cultural issues like that, you have to go into it completely accepting your own ignorance and being humble about it, and accepting that you want to do your due diligence, you want to research as much as possible, but you also have to accept that I may really mess this up, and you have to be open to that and aware of that. For me, a lot of it, because I was dealing with history, that's not something that I can just go to a friend and say, hey, what do you know about how Chinese were regarded in Portland in 1906? I mean, that's not something the average person is going to ask to know about. So for a lot of the basic stuff, I did have to go to research material, going for primary sources if possible, which is really hard when you're talking about the Chinese and Japanese experience at that time, because a lot of it didn't survive and a lot of it was lost in the San Francisco earthquake when Chinatown burned. And people people think about, the nugget that John Marshall dug out in California in 1848, that was lost. But there was a wealth of other history and family history and genealogy, all of these treasures that were lost in that disaster too. So yeah, I couldn't get as many primary sources as I wanted for that reason, but I still looked for cultural societies. I went to the Taoist temple in my hometown, bought research books there, and I listened to critique partners and told them, hey, look at my trans character, look at my Chinese and Japanese characters, let me know if I've screwed up so that I can fix them and get things right. And then my agent edits, she reads over all of my manuscripts before I send them in. So she gives me her feedback, and then of course I listen to my editor. And that doesn't mean that I automatically agree with everything that she says, but it means that I think about it, I consider it, and we have a dialogue about it, because we want the book to be as good as it can be. And we're both in complete agreement in that.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. So as you can see from this, I'm actually going to show you Beth's website really quickly, just so you can get an idea for her bibliography. And it really speaks to I just want you to see what she's just described. So let me just show you her site here. And this has been so fun to visit and to understand more about her work. She has beautiful book covers, so that's always fun, and it draws you in. And I zoomed a little too fast there. Here we go. So Breath of Earth, Call of Fire. And when is the next one in this series coming out?
Well, Call of Fire just came out in August, and the third one, Roar of Sky, is going to be out in October of 2018.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. So there's more coming. And then I noticed that you have an upcoming release here. So if you could tell us a little bit about Red Dust and Dancing Horses.
Yeah, that is my short story and poetry collection, and it is coming out on November 7th. And it's having a kind of a big debut at World Fantasy in San Antonio, and then it'll be available everywhere on November 7th, and that is in print and an ebook. And it's a wide variety of stories. There are steampunk stories in there. There are alt history steampunk stories, but it's also space opera, urban fantasy, straight out fantasy, a lot of flash fiction. There's even a story from the viewpoint of a cat having to deal with the apocalypse through their viewpoint. Just
so cool.
All kinds of things in there.
Awesome. And I love that cover as well. I just love nerding out over these covers. And then we have the Clockwork Dagger series, where there are some additional books beyond the duology, right?
Yeah, I have 2 short stories and a novella that were released separately, and they're still available for 99 cents each, but you can also buy them together in the collection Deep Roots.
Okay, awesome. And this site is so wonderful for anyone creating their author site. As I scroll up here, you can see that she has some really thorough bibliography. She also has a really impressive bio page. I felt like anyone who is jumping into being an author should pretty much take a lesson from your bio page. So your press kit page, excuse me. Oh, yeah. So I'll click on that really quickly if that's okay, because This is really educational. What you see here on Beth's site is she has all the pictures for her different novels. And then she also has these different lengths of bios, and she says how many words they are. And I know that I am going to be emulating this. So I just wanted to throw that out to all you creators and writers as you design your site, which can feel a little overwhelming sometimes. But
it can. And I'll tell you what, I rely on my press kit every single week, because whenever I'm doing guest blog posts or interviews or podcasts, I can send that link to the person who's doing it, and they have everything right there, easy, and then get whatever sizes they want. And then when I'm even doing my own submissions for short stories and poems, I go to my own site and I copy and paste whatever size bio I need.
Exactly. That one-stop shopping is really important as well. So
yeah, it's a little bit of time to set it up, but it is invaluable. It saved me so much time since then.
Thank you so much for describing that. Okay, so from Twitter, and this was actually a tweet that I saw in response to a promotion that Beth was running. bought, looks excellent, ticks just about all the boxes for me. So I was really excited about the Clockwork Dagger, and it makes us ask, what are the boxes that you need to tick in order to get this response?
Gosh, and I wish there was an easy answer to that, because you want to say, my books will tick all your boxes, buy my books.
Of course. Yeah.
but reality isn't quite that kind. And steampunk in particular, it is looked at as more of a niche genre. It is not and I've had several people tell me, oh, I'd like to support you, but I don't read steampunk. I read one steampunk a couple years ago. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I don't read it. And I've been told that to my face. And I'm like, you could still try mine.
Yeah.
It's different, I swear.
This is new.
Yeah, it's totally different than anything else. But yeah, I mean, you do want to tick those boxes. And it's hard to know, and a lot of it is relying on people to retweet or share. Because I know a lot of the people I'm preaching to the choir. A lot of people have already read my books. It's about reaching that next ring of people who don't know about my books or will only buy it because it is on sale, which I think is totally cool, because I buy lots of my friends' books when they go on sale too. There's nothing to be ashamed of there. But yeah, for me, it's Clockwork Dagger. I really want to say, if you like the mystery element and the epic fantasy element, if you love the Final Fantasy games and kind of want to see that reworked into a fun and original world, then go for that, because it has all that. And then for Breath of Earth, it's the alternate history. Are you a history geek? Do you want to read something that is educational as well as entertaining? Because like you said, with the source material that I cite, I really encourage people to go, hey, okay, I was reading this book and I thought this was totally made up, and it turned out it was actually something that really happened. Like, there really is a dog tag law that was enforced from the 1890s, and the Chinese were the first in the country who had to carry photo identification at all times, or they could be deported for that. And I mean, I'm California born and raised. I wasn't taught that in school. I didn't know that. And things like that. And I get so many readers who tell me, I lived in California. I had no idea about any of that. And I think with Breath of Earth, that's what I really want to say to people. Okay, if you like really learning about history, and not the glamorous parts of history, but the bits that people are ashamed of now and they want to hide, but that need to see the light for that very reason, then they should read Breath of Earth, and they'll find that in there.
That makes a lot of sense. As you're talking about that, it makes me realize that there are so many stories in our vicinity. And it sounds like, even though you're in Phoenix now, you're drawing on your past experience. And I think it is important to try to be marketable, but to also, bring something unique. And that's exactly what Beth has done. And I think that's why it's resonating. Next, we have a phone message. So this is a question from Steve in Ely, Nevada.
Hi, my name is Steve, and I'm from Ely, Nevada. And I would like to know how you come up with your storyline. Thank you.
That's such a big question. It's really, as an author, you have to pick up on hints and story prompts everywhere. Watching the news, reading books, you have to be a sponge and think. For me, it's a constant what if. It's like, oh, well, that's cool. What if? And kind of looking at life that way, just with a endless curiosity about everything. And then it's a matter of taking those what ifs and splicing them together. It's like with Clockwork Dagger, and I thought, okay, I would like to write another novel about a healer and a magical take on that. I like steampunk. I would like to go the steampunk route. What could I cross over with that in a unique way? And I thought, Murder on the Orient Express. Okay. And then kind of everything developed from there. And then for Breath of Earth, that came from, I wanted to do a steampunk take on the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which happens in the book. That's not a spoiler, because why it happens is totally different than history. So I like to joke when I'm doing panels, spoiler alert, there's an earthquake.
You're like, what? Yeah.
Well, some people are like, oh, you can't give that away. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's on the cover. But why it happens is different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really about taking all these little bits and pieces of ideas that you see everywhere twining them together in an original way. Novels, you take more of that and it involves more threading. But even if I'm talking like a flash fic, which is 1,000 words or fewer, it's the same thing. You're just looking at it on a smaller scale because you only need a couple characters and, just one or two plot threads, maybe. That's it. Novels, it's much bigger than that.
It's expansive. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. I think that, one thing I've heard is that a lot of creativity is combining unlike ideas and making them synergize, right?
Yeah.
So that sounds exactly like what you're doing. And I think that's where a lot of people can start and just let it run from there. So thank you. Okay. So I have some questions for Beth about her perspective on where steampunk's going, but before I jump into that, I want to just ask about the recipes that are featured on your site, because it really made you come alive for me even before I met you. And do you have any advice for authors or people, any creator within the steampunk space, and how they are, or any space, any punk space, and how they can combine an unrelated interest and bring it in?
Well, it comes down to one of those buzzwords, branding. And when I was working years ago and I had just signed with my agent and my book was starting to go out there, and I was looking at my little blog, which was then on LiveJournal, and going, okay, I need a reason to have more blog posts every week. And I saw other people were doing things like knitting and yarn, or they had a kitten or a ferret, and they had all these different things going that became what they were known for, and that made them more human. It wasn't just, this is how I write books and how you should write books too, kind of thing. It really made it fun. And I thought, okay, my cats are older, they're, not quite so cooperative in a photogenic way. What can I do that will give me blog posts every week, and that's something I will enjoy and that will draw other people in too? So I started doing my Bready or Not recipe posts every Wednesday, and it's kind of evolved from there, and it's still going strong, and it's now been mentioned in major newspapers and major media all over the world. It gets mentioned in lots of interviews. When I go to conventions, I bring cookies and I feed cookies to people everywhere.
I did not know that. That is awesome.
Yeah, and then I tell people, I have the website, go to my website and you can get the recipe, because I'm totally open about all recipes. I don't believe in any cooking secrets. I think food is awesome and it should be shared and it should be a joyous thing. And, here's a recipe, here's a cookie, enjoy, kind of thing. So that's what I do, and it's become part of my branding. And I think if I'm going to have a reputation for something, being known for really good cookies is not a bad way to go.
It's not bad. It's pretty good. And I just want to show the audience Beth's site because it's awesome. This Bready or Not blog that she runs. And I imagine, Beth, that this brings in all kinds of traffic, and then they see your recipe and then they see your book. Is that kind of how it goes sometimes?
That's kind of how it goes. Yeah. And actually about 2/3 of my website traffic is my recipes.
That is so cool.
Yep. I'm actually tracking that data now. And that's worldwide too. It's people coming, looking at my apple tart recipe, or coming from the Ukraine, and lots of Canadians have been coming and looking at my maple recipes because I have a lot of maple on there.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. And that's the hope. It's like, okay, here's a recipe and ta-da, look, I have books too.
I think that's genius, actually. And I think I saw some pretty amazing recipes. So I think you're delivering awesome value just for that. Some of that stuff I really wanted to try to make. So
please do.
I will.
That's why it's there.
Awesome. So where do you think steampunk is going? We've talked a lot about being a creator of steampunk, and we've talked about your specific books. Do you feel like steampunk, is that wave over, or do you feel like the world still needs steampunk?
I have a really funny story along this line.
Okay, good.
The day that Clockwork Dagger came out, it was reviewed on NPR, which was like, wow, this is awesome. So
cool.
I went there and, I did the thing that no one should ever do. And, I read the comments. and I know better than that now, because I fight depression, and reading reviews and comments it's just, you kind of learn to not do it after a while. But I looked at the comments, and one of the comments on there literally said, "Oh, this book sounds so bad. Steampunk has jumped the shark." And that was the day my book came out. And I'm there
Wow.
I'm like, okay, I killed Steampunk in the first day.
Oh my gosh. I can't think of like a crazier comment really. Well, I guess we all could, but that's pretty to read that on your day when you're having all this. But I'm assuming you don't agree.
I don't
with this comment.
Well, there are a lot of, I don't think Steampunk is dead, and I don't think it is going to die, but there is a fact within the major publishers, Steampunk is a hard sell. And I'm going to be very honest with that. Even when my agent was sending Clockwork Dagger out to publishers, we had publishers who turned it down saying, "We published Steampunk, it didn't sell, we're not in the market for it right now, even though this sounds fun."
Yeah.
So the market is so, it's so there's a lot of whim to it, there's a lot of luck to it as well, and it's also a matter of just having the right angle to make a publisher take a gamble on your book. So if you're writing Steampunk now, and NaNoWriMo is November, so I imagine there are going to be a lot of people who are really into their new book. Be realistic about it. It is going to be a hard sell because the industry is skittish about it, but there is still awesome Steampunk that is coming out now. So it's not dead by any means. There was one book, let me see, I have it. Okay, The Guns Above by Robin Bennis. That's one that just came out a couple months ago. And it's really cool because it's like military steampunk on airships. It's literally airship combat.
So she's taken a new slant compared to, there have been, military steampunk things, but she's going beyond what the publishers were maybe expecting when she's submitted. Is that what
it's a totally different take on it. It's more like the Flintlock fantasies, like you see like Django Wexler or Brian McClellan doing, that are on the ground battlefields, but this is on airships. And it's not all hand wavy about the elements. It's actually nitty gritty. This is how airships work. This is the bullets are zinging through the envelopes, and the guys are trying to patch it when the battle is ongoing. There's a risk of fire, all this really complex, neat stuff. And that's a book that just came out in 2017. And then there's series like Megan E. O'Keefe has her books with Angry Robot, that it's a fabulous steampunk trilogy that has a very Firefly-like vibe to it, where it's the lovable rogue types, and there's, it's just tremendous fun. And there are more new books coming out all the time. So it's not dead, it's changing, it's becoming a harder sell, but there's still really good stuff, and there's still opportunity out there for people.
I think that's a really good mix of the reality as well as keeping an open mind. And I think that's what the publishers are doing as well. And if you're self-publishing, you still are thinking about your audience. And I think the audience has that balance as well, where maybe they've read a lot, maybe they're not readily open for more, but the right thing, anybody's going to read the right thing, right?
Yeah. So. And an indie publisher, there are a lot of excellent indie steampunk books. Lindsay Broker has fabulous series going on in that. Of course, she writes like in a million genres and is awesome in all of them. But so if you're indie, it's not as restrictive. And one thing indies have an advantage of, they can control the price.
Yes.
And for people who are buying ebooks, if I can't control my prices on my books. So my ebooks will hover like $7.99, $9.99 for an ebook. And I agree, that's kind of steep, and I wouldn't want to pay that either. Which is why when it's on sale for $1.99, I'm like, get it when it's actually on sale.
Start now, yeah.
Yeah, but indie authors, they can have the first book on free, and then they can kind of, do the second one for $1.99 and get people hooked on the whole series that way. And that amount of control over pricing is very empowering for indies.
I think so. And especially in a niche market, it might be even more important. We could argue that, but I think.
No, I agree. I think it is.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for that perspective, because I know we have, as I've said, a lot of writers and as well as readers. And so it really helps to understand the market and to get your view on it, because you've been doing this so well for a long time. So
it feels like a long time, but Clockwork Dagger 2014. But that's in publishing. That's like I'm an old woman.
No, that's probably young in publishing, right? I don't know.
Well, it's an industry that is so in flux.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I know a little bit about publishing, but I only see one perspective, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And it's because of the pressure that the indie industry is putting on the main publishers, that's making them change how they market their books. So everything is changing right now. So you think you know what's going on, and then a month later you're like, I really have no clue.
I'm on this new planet. What is going on? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just going to write this and really hope and beg people to actually buy it.
Yes. And I'm going to blog about my other interest, and I'm going to just keep moving forward.
Yes. Here's a cookie recipe.
Yes.
Enjoy. Yeah.
Yes, totally. Okay. Well, that is all my questions for you today, Beth. Do you have any questions for me, or any other final observations?
Gosh, well, this has been great fun. You have a great podcast going here and great questions. I mean, I love it. It's like, okay, I've got to brain work, think, caffeine, kick in there.
Good. No, I appreciate it. I love just writing the questions that I want to know about. And I know my audience is submitting awesome questions as well. So I'm glad.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay. So Beth, where can we find your work? We've talked a lot about it. We've already looked at the site, but let's just give one more direction so that people know where to go next to find out more.
Yeah. BethCato.com, and that's Cato spelled C-A-T-O. And on there you can find the Bready or Not recipe blog. Like I said, new recipe every Wednesday. I have a newsletter. If they join that, they get book news, and they also get a collection of all of the links of the previous month's recipes all in one spot.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then there's the bibliography where they can find links to my novels, and I also have a lot of short stories and poetry that can be read online in many cases for free. And Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I mean, I have a bit of everything on there. And Facebook and Twitter links, as well as Pinterest links, are on there too, and people should feel free to add me and connect with me wherever.
That sounds great. Thank you again for being on the show and inspiring us. And it was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. This has just been great fun.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. If you would like to beta read my works in progress, please go to cindygrigg.com. So CINDYGRIGG, that's 2 G's.com. Again, it's wonderful to have you here, and please visit storypunks.world to learn more and to get involved.